Hello. Fantastic. Welcome to another actually great session here where we talk about blockchain technology and trade finance. Michael Awori, COO and co-founder of the TDB Bank, the Trade and Development Bank, as well as Atul Patel, who is going to be talking about how they have implemented blockchain technology as part of making this possible. Gentlemen, welcome to this specific show and conference.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. Pleasure to be here.
Before we dive into the questions to each and every single one of you, Michael, why don't you actually go ahead and briefly talk about yourself and present who you are and what you are doing with TDB, and maybe briefly talk to us about TDB and what it all means for the audience. Please go on.
Thank you, John. I'm Michael Awori. I'm the Deputy CEO and Chief Operating Officer of Trade and Development Bank. We are a regional development bank, operates across 22 member states in Eastern and Southern Africa. We specialize in trade finance, particularly cross-border trade finance, as well as project and infrastructure finance. Feel a little bit out of place. This is probably the only banker on the schedule today, but thank you for the warm welcome, and very glad to be here.
Absolutely, and thank you very much indeed, Michael, for that introduction. Very short and straight to the point. Atul Patel, please go ahead and introduce yourself and tell the audience exactly what you do, and we are going to dive into the crux of the matter for this specific topic.
Absolutely. My pleasure, John. Thank you for inviting me into this panel. I am Atul Patel. I am co-founder of dltedgers, the largest fintech company out of Singapore, specialized on cross-border trade and trade execution. And we are really pleasure to have Michael here, who is early adopter of the technology into the application so that we can actually really do this digital trade in action. And we are very proud about, making it real, if you will. And a 72 people strong team of dltedgers is really every single day working towards digitizing trade. So
fantastic.
Here.
This to me is very interesting. This is a real example of having to move away from the hype and getting to mainstream. And in this specific space, mainstream, an African bank seeking to actually implement blockchain technology. Just in bracket, I once met a sheikh here in Dubai in December 2018 who mentioned to me one thing. And this is what he mentioned. He said to me, he said, John, blockchain technology is the cure medicine for Africa. Only a few people will understand what it means, right? But I want to see exactly how have you guys been able to use this medicine and apply that in your trade finance banking processes. So I'm going to kick off with you, Michael, by asking you the first question. Could you tell us exactly how the Trade and Development Bank has been using blockchain technology to conclude trade finance in your transactions? You all each have about 2 minutes, but you know what? Please feel free to actually dive in and let's educate the masses about this specific topic.
Right. No, thank you, John. And I'd say our blockchain journey, if you will, it started with a client, right? Mm-hmm. In early 2019, I was having a conversation with the CFO of one of our clients. His company's based in Singapore and already active in blockchain, right? They had tested blockchain with the tools platform in conjunction with several large Asian banks on similar transactions to what that client was doing with me in Africa. And so that client had experienced the benefits, right? Enable them to close their transactions faster, essentially to receive their revenue or their collections faster, which reduces their cost as they were able to pay off their pre-financing sooner. So directly contributed to their bottom line. So the CFO said again, we're doing similar transactions, and could you look into this? And so at TDB, we are a nimble and innovative organization, and so we said, sure, we'll look into it. And so a few weeks later, I hopped on a plane to Singapore, back in the day when you could do things like that, hopping on a plane and traveling places. So I met with my client. He introduced me to Atul and his management team at DLT. And again, I'm not a tech guy, right? I'm a banker, but the application and the potential benefits, right, of using blockchain were immediately apparent, right? So returned to our operational hub here in Nairobi, and we assembled a team that went through, what we call a new product approval process, typical in banking, right? So this is a multi-departmental team, right? Certainly IT was involved, but of course, treasury, risk, legal, compliance, so a proper multi-dimensional team to really study and analyze what the proposition was. And then in August, we began a pilot project. So we ran side by side, right? So we executed a transaction on our regular process, and concurrent to that, working with Atul and his team, we also executed that transaction on the blockchain platform, right? And eventually, it was actually two transactions, and eventually over those two transactions, we executed a little over $22 million worth of transactions on the platform, which is facilitating the importation of about 50,000 metric tons of sugar from Asia to Africa. And that's how we got into blockchain.
Well done. I mean, this is impressive. I certainly personally have so many more questions for you, but I don't think that we'll have enough time to actually really address that. For example, to understand some of the regulatory constraint that you probably have had to face in your country or in Kenya or where the bank is located, and maybe also your collaborating banks that may not necessarily be able to implement blockchain technology, and also how you've been able to move probably digital assets to be able to settle all these transactions, right? But I got to move into the next question for you still, Michael. And perhaps you can also dash into some of these that I've just mentioned. What kind of impact it has had for the actors involved? Exactly. I mean, the regulators, the banks, the central banks, or the entities. Can you please explain and collaborate and explain to the audience exactly this?
Right. So I'd say, look, we took a very practical approach, right? Because as you said, there's many different players potentially involved, and there's really tough issues, right? Particularly when you're talking about, digitizing a document, and that digital version becoming the legal equivalent, right, of the paper document, and regulatory landscape not being completely aligned to that, and then all the other banks within the chain not being all on the same page, right? So it's a very complicated journey, right? Mm-hmm. But we looked at it just in that sense, in a journey, and we didn't have to do 100% day one, right? We analyzed it, we looked at it, and we said, in this sandbox, can we do, let's say, 80% of it, right? And that's the approach that we took, right? But that 80% delivered significant impact, right? So again, that impact was clear to us from day one, or that potential, right? So, we pride ourselves on making data-driven decisions. And again, the data, right, was there. So we knew how long it takes to receive physical documents, to process them, to send them to the next bank in the cycle, and then have it executed, right? So end to end, that's a 10 to 15 day cycle on average, right? And under blockchain, with the initial parameters that we set, right, which again was not going 100%, but within those initial parameters, we could cut 4 days from that process, from that cycle, right? That means the supplier is getting paid 4 days faster. And then from that point, it's easy to quantify the benefits, right? It's just simple math. So we know what the daily cost of borrowing is, right? Mm-hmm. And so you can simply multiply that by the number of days. And those are savings that the supplier is immediately realizing, right? Mm-hmm. And these are large transactions, large dollar value. So 4 days actually translates into a meaningful amount of money, right? And then, of course, as a DFI, there's other benefits that we care about too from a sustainability angle, So there's a certain amount of paper that we can reduce or eliminate from the process. There's a certain amount of air travel, right, that we can reduce from the process. Not eliminate entirely, but at least reduce. Again, all of those can be quantified, and it's a direct reduction in the carbon footprint of the transaction. Sure. So the significant benefits really to all the parties. From a bank perspective, we're dispersing quicker, right? The client is getting paid quicker. And again, it's good for the environment.
Talking about the client being paid quicker, I'm going to ask you that question again towards the closing comments. But let me move into Atul Patel right now, whom you've been able to work with to implementing these technologies. Atul, can you tell me or tell us more about the extent of use of blockchain in trade finance in Africa and globally? Where do we currently stand? What's your opinion? And is mass adoption of blockchain inevitable? I mean, you've been able to work with TDB and being quite successful in that implementation. It looks like it's a successful case for Africa. What would you say about this?
Yeah, thank you, John, and thank you, Michael. So the company that I work with, DLT Ledger, is always focused on customer-centric network creation to the point that Michael talked about, right? To have an incremental path of digitization and not to aim for 100% from day one, right? That's one of the key elements that we work together with, and that's how you could actually make technology palatable in the bite-sized chunks to different parties in the chain who are not technically aware or digitally educated in terms of what this means to them, right? So kind of layer it into the 4 different elements. First, looking at documents. Which are the documents that I could digitize, right, from the word go? And do I kind of digitize those communication of documents back and forth, the draft documents back and forth? Can I digitize that? Can I digitize contracts and make sure that I actually provide the immutable trail of confirming those contracts into a private blockchain? Can I actually provide a tracking view across the continent when sugar is moving from one continent to another? Similarly, fertilizer is moving from Africa, within Africa, in one part of Africa to another. Can I actually looking at tracking of it? And then finally, the financing element of it, right? So do I actually make sure that I am able to finance with the right set of documents? So there are different levers which actually drives the adoption of this. And what we have seen across, we have over 21 corporate customers, and we work together with 45 different banks. What we have seen is it's the journey which is really very important, and how you define the different parts in the journey. And that's where Michael and the team had that leadership to think about journey and taking the baby step first, then moving into next step and making sure that we take all parties along, all different departments along, right? So I think to me, the technology is out there. Our private permission blockchain technology is out there for a number of years, I think, as you probably know more than me. But it's about the application and creating the persona for operations, persona right. for finance, and how we can make that work is where we specialize on. So I do feel that, you don't really, you are not disadvantaged, if you will, if you do not know what technology is, because it's a simple browser. You can work it on mobile phone as well, and you can actually do your activity, which we call as part of the blockchain consensus activity, to move across your trade execution process. So it's fairly simple templates that we have created for different parties, which I think has led to the success.
Beautiful. I think, look, there's 2 more questions for the both of you ready. But Atul, carrying on with you, and you have 2 minutes exactly on this particular question. What kind of bottlenecks exist in the adoption of blockchain technology by trade financiers and their stakeholders, and what can be done to overcome those challenges and accelerate its use? Based on your experience, especially perhaps with TDB and or your other 21 customers, what would you say about that?
Well, first of all, blockchain is not Bitcoin. Yes, this is Bitcoin events, but it is blockchain is not Bitcoin as it comes to trade finance and trade finance execution, right? So one has to be very clear about the process efficiency improvement, reduction of the error, reduction of the paper, the cycle time reduction, the benefits that enterprise applications on trade finance, a digitization that DLT Ledger provides. I think that's the number one point, right? This has nothing to do with the crypto. This has nothing to do with the tokens. Yeah, we don't need any regulatory approval to do what Michael is doing, right? And any other banks within Africa do not need any regulatory approval. So there's this whole misnomer about that I need a regulatory approval to do different things, because you are just jumping the gun and you haven't really looked at the whole pathway to get there, right? So I think the first thing is awareness. Or I would say a lack of awareness of enterprise blockchain, which doesn't equate to crypto. I think that's the first bottleneck, right? People always, there was one other bank in Egypt. I wouldn't name them. They actually wanted us to get in central bank approval, and we told them we are not doing anything with this, and it took us about 6 weeks to get through the point, which we said, look, there is nothing regulatory about it that you need an approval here. So the first is that. The second point is about really this fear that, look, if I go digital, I will basically, maybe lose my job or things like, I may not be still required in the bank or things like that, right? So I think it requires a kind of a learning on the ground to the various stakeholders within the bank to say, look, this is allowing you to do your job better. It's not about replacing operations people. It's about making sure you make less error, improve the productivity. You can do better value-added stuff, build new products, and come out with new innovative products, right? So it's about just the human fear that technology will replace my work, right? That's kind of the second bottleneck I see. And the third one is really all about really getting people to come on to right? So people say, no, I'm just going to be on the phone. I'm not going to come on because I don't understand, right? So to them, we actually have created a digital readiness index, which allows even a surveyor who is in the remote part of Africa could actually use the application from the mobile phone and participate in this network, right? There's absolutely no training needed. So I would say those are the adoption, awareness, and kind of a wrong positioning about enterprise blockchain remains are the three bottlenecks. Okay,
great. Atul, thank you very much indeed for that. There's obviously a lot of questions, but you know what? This is not a panel discussion, unfortunately, and I wish that we'd have a longer time frame to discuss. I personally still have a lot of questions for you. It's exciting what you guys have done, and but in closing remarks, Michael, what would you say is the next step for TDB with regard to blockchain? I mean, look, considering, for example, in Africa, I would ask even, how do you guys do the KYB? The know your business. We know that in certain parts of the world, in the DRC, paperwork is very difficult to actually quantify. How do you do that? And please go ahead and give the audience your closing remarks on blockchain adoption and technology. Right. Thank you.
No, thank you, John. And I think I'd pick up really from Atul's comments, right? So since that initial pilot in 2019, we've been engaging with clients, right, to explain the benefits to clients and have more clients test out blockchain, but as well as the wider sort of industry as well through various forums, right? Sort of just saying, hey, we've tried this, it worked, and how can we sort of advocate for wider adoption of the technology? I'd say 2020 was a game changer, or COVID was a game changer, right? It tipped a few clients into moving forward. That 10 to 15 day cycle that I mentioned earlier was doubled or tripled, right? In some cases, if you recall, during the peak of the lockdowns that we all experienced, where airports were closed and ports were closed, and so those paper documents that banks are still reliant on literally could not move, right? And so in terms of transactions executed on blockchain, our volumes significantly increased from that 22 million in 2019. In 2020, we more than doubled that to a little over 60 million. And in year to date, through the fourth quarter, we are on pace to do about 100 million and should exceed probably $250 million this year. So we continue to innovate in the wider space. So we're working with DLT, looking at the potential for AI and machine learning to allow the ability to reach consensus even faster on the platform.
Sure.
But in terms of what's next for us, really, it's not about innovation for innovation's sake, right? Or even blockchain for blockchain's sake, right? So I'd go back to where we started, which is, we first did this in response to a client request, right? In response to our focus on adding value to our clients, right? So blockchain has been one part of our overall digital transformation journey, right? And that journey is about banking better, faster, cheaper, right?
Right.
Delivering more for all of our stakeholders, including our clients, our shareholders, and the environment. So I'd say that's what's next for TDP.
Thank you. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Atul. I really appreciate it.